Well, Joe Biden woke up this morning, had his Metamucil, and decided, I guess, to lay a political egg. Um, in one of the most outdated and tone-deaf statements I have read, Joe Biden has decided to call for more gun control. Now, I have to say, I was kind of worried about the gun stuff a couple months ago because I've always maintained that if they tried it, just to take away people's guns or to, stop people from being able to get guns, if they tried to bring back, the old, for example, the old Clinton era assault weapons ban, all that stuff's dead on arrival. Nobody wants to hear it. You can't make a case for that. Too polarizing. Nobody's going to move an inch on that. They understand that you just want to come take their guns. But some little things here or there, I thought they actually could get done. Like, for example, banning online ammo sales, which wouldn't make it impossible for people to get any kinds of ammo or anything like that. It would just make it really expensive because since Walmart and all these other stores have decided to ban inexpensive ammo themselves and only sell expensive hunting ammo, the only way to get cheap bulk ammo has, been online. But luckily, that's not what Joe Biden called for in his statement. What Joe Biden decided to call for, because, I guess maybe he still has some of his own ideas, because this is something that only Joe Biden would be dumb enough to suggest, I think, is he essentially called for a retread of the old Clinton-era gun ban and also adding in gun registration, which, is scary, but again, that's also an old idea. These are things that gun owners in this country and people on the right in general have heard for decades now. And, we're all wise to it. This is not a new idea, and it's nothing that anybody is going to accept. And, someone like me, I guess, who's been involved with, the online gun community since Sandy Hook, Sandy Hook, that was Newtown, same thing. And I just mean because there was a lot of gun control talk after that. A lot of the same suggestions: gun registration, assault weapons ban, blah blah blah. All this stuff is old news to me. But what the Clinton era gun ban was, it was called the assault weapons ban, and it was essentially a ban on anything that kind of looks like an AR-15. It was still back in that, the obsession with the AR-15 goes back, I guess, at least to the 80s. And people didn't like guns that looked scary. So they didn't like plastic, they didn't like any sort of muzzle device like a flash hider, which, for those of you who don't know, all that is just something that makes it so that there's not a flash at the muzzle when the bullet comes out, because there's normally there could be like a fireball, depending on a certain number of factors. Just if there's any unburnt powder that gets expelled out the front of the muzzle, then all of a sudden it catches a bunch of oxygen that feeds the fire and it creates a fireball. That's just one example of a muzzle device. There are also muzzle brakes that kind of create more of a fireball, but they sort of direct the energy upwards to keep your muzzle down so you can aim a little better. And then there's, pistol grips, retractable stocks, all these sorts of things. A barrel shroud, that's the famous one. That's what made Tucker internet famous back in the day. One of the early viral YouTube videos was Tucker asking, not Dianne Feinstein, I believe it was the other senator from California who's not there anymore. It was a woman, the woman who Kamala Harris replaced. I believe she was bringing up an assault weapons ban like back in 2008, and Tucker on his MSNBC show, I know, hard to think, asked her, he was reading off all the lists of features of guns that it would ban, and one of them was a barrel shroud. So he asked her, what is a barrel shroud? Because, just as gotcha, because obviously it's just some random thing. Why would you put this on the list? It doesn't mean anything. So he asked her, and she didn't know what a barrel shroud was. She had no idea. And so it made for a funny gotcha clip that could get used on people. But it's just an example of the sorts of things that they put on that list of banned features that make something an assault weapon. And the reason why they have all those things is because they're just popular things. Because those are the kinds of guns that sell a lot. Most rifles sold in this country are based on ARs, or they're at least something that's sort of in that same class. You have a 223 really light bullet, plastic stock, makes it kind of light to carry around. They have flash hiders. These are all, just the elements that you would find in a common and popular rifle. And so that's why they want to ban them, so that they can just, antagonize people for no real reason. Now, something else that the Clinton-era gun ban did was ban quote-unquote high-capacity magazines, anything over 10 rounds, I believe it was. And Bill Ruger, founder of Sturm, Ruger and Company, he was all in favor of this. He never sold guns that had high-capacity magazines. You couldn't get a magazine for a Ruger 1022 in anything over 10 rounds until after he died. Then his kids started making them. It's kind of funny, but the Ruger Company never used to make anything with more than a 10-round magazine. Bill Ruger was from Massachusetts. He said nobody needs more than 10 rounds, blah, blah, blah. And so they want to ban that too. Now, back with the Clinton gun ban, none of this was retroactive. It was proactive. So everything that was before 1994, I believe it was an 8-year ban, 94 to, or maybe it was 10 years, 94 to 04. I can't remember exactly. But it was either 02 or 04 it ended. And everything from before 94 was still in circulation. So it was more of an annoyance than anything. It was just a few years, like a decade, in which you couldn't go out and buy new guns that weren't really dumb and were specially made to work around the ban. Like having thumbhole stocks. It was just a bunch of very ugly guns that came out in those years. Now, the last thing is something that has never been implemented before, and that is gun registration, euphemistically known as universal background checks. Now, we already have background checks anytime you go and buy a gun. So when they say that they're talking about, well, we need background checks for everything, what they're saying is they want everyone to put their guns in a national registry, and every time you hand that gun over to someone, you have to sign it over and probably pay sales tax. Whereas now, only dealers have to do that. If you go to a gun shop and you buy a gun, they do a background check, you get it. And if you were to, say, gift that gun to a family member, you would not, do a background check of your brother or something like that. When your grandfather dies, the estate doesn't do a background check of you before you get, his old shotgun or something. And so the reason why they want to implement this is so that they have a registry of every gun in America and everyone who owns those guns, so that, when they decide to, in the next 2 years, ratchet things up, and just as an example, probably would only take a couple of years, go around and start confiscating guns, they know where they all are. Whereas right now, if they passed a law saying we're going to confiscate all guns, people could just say, hey, I don't have any guns, because nobody knows who has all the guns. It's a very important part, of our freedom here, is that, it's a good, puts a good buffer between the government and the people who own guns, if the government doesn't know exactly who owns them. And yes, when you buy a gun at a gun shop, they fill out the form or whatever, and, they keep it on file for however long it is, like 20 years or something. But there's no centralized database where all that is stored and cataloged and organized. If the government wanted to go and say, okay, I'm going to confiscate this guy's guns, they would have to go around to every gun store in America and look for, a 4473 form that had been filled out, by you, in your name, and say, okay, what guns does this guy owe? And that obviously would just be too, be too labor intensive. They would not be able to know. But if they tell everyone, hey, you have to come forward and put your gun on some national registry, then it becomes real easy to go around. Then the FBI just has to knock on the door of every house that is registered to own a gun and say, hey, we're here to take your guns, and you have to submit. And so every gun owner in America has been expecting this for a long time, and so nobody's going to go along with this. I, for one, kind of hope that they pass this. Now, I was just talking about a couple days ago, Missouri becoming a sanctuary state for the Second Amendment. That bill, it hadn't been signed by the governor yet, but it probably will be, I'm sure. The only reason why it didn't get signed back in 2013, around the time of Sandy Hook, was because they had a Democrat governor. Texas also has said that they're going to pass a sanctuary law. Lots of counties across America have passed, Second Amendment sanctuary laws. And if there really is a push by Biden at the federal level to implement some kind of big gun control, I'm sure that a lot of states are going to start trying to push these Second Amendment sanctuary laws. And certainly a lot of local governments and county sheriffs and things. And so it is impossible for any such bill to be universally enforced. for that reason, I would like to see the federal government try and pass this bill. Pass exactly what Biden talked about. They've got a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. They can get it done. I think that probably what would end up happening is you would have Sinema of Arizona and Manchin of West Virginia voting against this, while Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, both Republicans, would vote for it. And so you would lose 2 Democrats, gain 2 Republicans. It would be a quote-unquote bipartisan bill. The Senate would be tied. Kamala Harris would come in, as the VP, break the tie. The House would pass it, and there you go. We have gun registration and an assault weapons ban. But let's see the feds try and enforce it. Honestly, I've said for a long time that if, the one issue that I think really could be a breaking point for the union that could just cause states to completely, turn against the federal government and say, hey, we're done with this whole union thing, is gun control, because it is the most divisive issue in the country. People are done arguing about it. And that's a good thing, because there's such a wide gulf between people who hate guns and people who like guns that you're never going to get them to agree on anything, and why should they? Both of them would be very unhappy. People who hate guns absolutely hate the idea that there are individuals in this country who aren't, jackbooted thugs, i.e. government, police, FBI agents, things like that, people other than that who own guns. And as long as they are going to be so intolerant, I mean, what's going halfway? Oh, okay, I'll just have slightly less guns, or I'll have a slightly less variety of guns that I have access to. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. People who hate guns hate guns. You're not going to make them happy unless you get rid of all the guns. And obviously, then the people who like guns are not going to be happy. So there's no compromise here. There's no room for compromise. There never can be. There never was. And so the places that hate guns, they should just go ahead and ban guns all they want. And the places that like guns, they should not ban anything. And so the answer then is either you get the federal government out of this stuff entirely, or people just decide to say, hey, if you want to use the federal government to impose these kinds of very divisive laws, we're not going to associate with the federal government. We're going to secede. We're getting out of here. It's over. I mean, it was yesterday, was it? I was talking about the case for blue state secession. Well, here's the case for red state secession. It's one paragraph, or one sentence if you want. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. All you have to do, I mean, the entire case for red state secession right there, all you need is the Second Amendment itself. Say that the federal government does not respect the Second Amendment, which is true, and boom, out. There you go. That's good enough reason to leave. Texas should leave. Florida should leave. Utah should leave. I believe Utah just passed constitutional carry. Something Florida and Texas should have done a long time ago. Alabama should leave. Mississippi should leave. Georgia should leave, but they might be a lost cause since their state government is so suicidal. South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana. The list goes on. Places where the population thinks that owning a gun is normal and good need to get out of the union. The union should be made up of essentially, I guess, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, although really just Chicago. The rest of Illinois is fine. California. Oregon's pretty pro-gun place. So is Washington. And frankly, earlier I said that Susan Collins, I think, might vote for this. I mean, she is from Maine. People in Maine own guns. I mean, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Northern New England, from what I understand, a very pro-gun place. People there, lots of them own guns. I believe both Vermont and New Hampshire have constitutional carry. No carry permit needed. Maine also does, from what I recall. Eric Brakey, I think, lists that as one of his top achievements, something that he passed while he was in the state senate there. So, I mean, places like that, it'd be hard to imagine them going along with gun grabbing. But it's hard to say at this point. I feel like northern New England, strategically, they're in a very bad place. It would be tough for them because they have a very odd culture that doesn't blend perfectly with New York City or with, Alabama. They're not like either of those places. They're like pro-gun lefties that want to live in the woods. But anyway, back to the main topic. I mean, this really could be a bill that would break up the Union. I've been saying this for a couple years. I mean, gun control is it. Go hard on gun control. Do it in the most offensive way possible. Do it in a totally ham-fisted way, which, by the way, this is. There's nothing subtle about what Biden is saying. Biden is just taking the old, the old gun control talking points and rolling them into it. I mean, this is the same old stuff that people have been fighting forever now. And if you use your very tenuous grip over Congress and the White House to ram this stuff through, people aren't going to tolerate that. You will have nullification at the very least, and if that happens, the federal government knows that they can't enforce this stuff without state cooperation because they don't have the police force at the federal level to enforce stuff like this at all. It's not going to happen. Well, actually, what they're going to start doing then is revoking FFL licenses. Because gun stores are licensed, gun dealers are licensed through the federal government. So that's what they would do. That would be their enforcement mechanism. They could not stop people in red states, I think, from manufacturing these sorts of guns. Although, no, then again, I mean, their licenses are still federal too. I guess, though, in these states that are sanctuary states, they just wouldn't care about having a federal license. The state would not shut them down. They'd say, who cares if you don't have a federal license? We don't recognize federal law. And that's that. And then you would just have gun dealers operating with impunity, which would be fantastic. Totally free of federal regulation then. Because, again, that's what happens here. If you pass a law that is so arduous that people don't follow it, they're not going to follow the rest of your laws either. And that's the beauty of this. That's why I'm saying that one bill could break the Union. It could break any government. When government becomes too burdensome on its people, it loses its power. Because if people get to the point to where they snap and they say, I can't follow your rules anymore, then you're not going to be able to force them to do anything. And so if states fight back against this, what's the federal government going to do? They're going to deny them money in the highway bill. I mean, that's the only card in their hand that they can play. It's the only arrow in their quiver. The federal government just says, okay, well, we're not going to give you money for the interstate. That's how Jimmy Carter lowered the speed limit to 55 miles per hour in the entire country. I'm not old enough to remember that, but there are people who remember that. And the way he did it was through the highway bill. And so at that point, what are the states going to do? Well, a state could say, well, we're paying all the, our citizens are paying all this money in taxes to the federal government. A very, again, similar argument to what I was saying yesterday about the blue states. We're paying all this money to the federal government, and we can't get any of it back to fund our highways. So the answer then would be secede, tell your citizens, okay, don't pay taxes to the federal government anymore. You're going to pay taxes to us, and we're going to use that money and build our highways. And you can cut out all the rest of the crap that the federal government does. I mean, think about it. You wouldn't have military budget. You wouldn't have. Well, I mean, you'd have to find a way to handle Medicare and Social Security. But again, this is. This would be. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Because where there's a will, there's a way. And so the key here is in generating the will. People will find a way to handle things. Whatever the friction there is on secession. States will figure that out. People will figure that out once they are at the point to where they realize, okay, we really can't do this anymore. And so we got to focus on Plan B. Taking over the federal government and trying to preserve our freedoms is not working. And again, it's going to take somebody who's kind of bold and, stands out from the crowd a bit to do that, a strong personality. And thankfully, DeSantis has kind of been acting that way in recent months. In the last few weeks, certainly. He's kind of become the de facto leader of the opposition because Trump hasn't been talking much. DeSantis has become sort of the most prominent guy against Biden. I read you that fake story about him, telling him to F off, which, almost 100% certain, that was a fake story. But the tension between Florida and the federal government is clear. And now that's also why I think that it's imperative that Florida passes some kind of sanctuary Second Amendment law before Congress passes any sort of gun-grabbing bill. Florida and all these other states need to nullify this new federal law, just like Colorado and these other states are nullifying, federal drug laws. I think it's heroic what the state of Colorado did, legalizing recreational marijuana. It was important not just in ending the war on drugs, which it was the first step in doing so, but just for the cause of nullification in general. It makes it much more feasible now for the pro-gun states to nullify any incoming federal gun laws and also federal gun laws that are already on the books. And this hopefully will lead to some sort of new nullification crisis, where the federal government is unable to enforce its own laws. At this point, the only thing other than what Biden was suggesting today that could do more to provoke a rebellion from red states than this gun ban and the gun registration is, after you register the guns, going and trying to confiscate them. But again, once you get to that point, it's going to be much harder to stop. And thankfully, I think, gun owners are woke enough on all this that they understand that gun registration is the prelude to gun grabbing. I mean, we've all made the parallels to Weimar Germany. Weimar Germany tells everyone, okay, you have to register your guns, and then Hitler gets in there and he takes away all the guns because he knows where they all are. I mean, these are tired old cliches for a reason. It's because they're true. And so I expect Dianne Feinstein, who's the one who brought up this bill most recently, to bring up this bill again. You're not going to see Sheila Jackson Lee's bill getting any airtime, but, assault weapons ban, magazine ban, and gun registration. Those are the three items that they've decided are going to be at the top of the agenda. And it's dead on arrival. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.